So I want to talk about the need for social entrepreneurship education in Africa, particularly Africa, right? Well, really across all countries with very low social economic statuses, right? But for now, I want to focus on Africa because, of course, this is where I am, and particularly where I come from is South Africa. Now, the reason for this, um, firstly, let me point out that I believe this is actually what should be the priority of, well, of course, technology also, technological education also, but importantly social entrepreneurship education, right? And I'll start with this by actually talking about my story first, right? And my experience of actually being part of a global entrepreneurship organization, social entrepreneurship organization. So the organization's name is called Enactors, and what Enactors does is that in every participating university across the world, what they do is they gather students to actually join the society, right? And then once students join that society during their university years, they then get to run their society like an organization. They have to actually run it like a real business. But in this case, they have to run it like a social business, a social enterprise, right? So you'd find that within this organization, there's different departments just like you would normally find in a real business. So there's finance, there's projects, there's marketing, there's admin, all these different departments. And then uh, by the beginning of the year, right, by the beginning of the enactors year, we have our own calendar. By the beginning of the year, we're given a certain budget, right? And then we're given a certain task, but there are also certain competitions we're given along the way so that we can just enter, just to challenge us. But importantly, the main task, which is basically to run that organization while we're in university, while we are studying our different courses, but we have to run that organization like an actual social business. And what we do is that then we will go out into the communities and find any social problem that we get to choose, right? The society doesn't choose it for us. We, as the business, as a student-based business, get to choose for ourselves. So maybe it could be crime in disadvantaged communities, it could be littering, it could be, well, but in our case we chose urban farming, right? We realized that there was a huge problem in the Western Cape where there was a huge water shortage, but also their soil wasn't as fertile. And of course, there was a lot of farmers there, there was a lot of community farmers, and those are a few of the many challenges that they were facing. But my point is here is that out of this entire experience, all of us, we learned so much. But well, before I get to how much we've learned, let me just finish up with how this thing works, right? So you then, of course, find the social problem, and then after finding the social problem, you would then work a couple of months before the end of the enactor's calendar year. So you would work towards solving the problem, of course, getting it to run and function like a business, meet up with the beneficiaries. Well, the word beneficiary sounds more like it's a non-profit organization and we're dealing with, beneficiaries. But in this case, they were our customers, but we were just told to call them, or rather we were just calling them beneficiaries, right? But basically those are the people that we were working with, of course, helping them deal with certain social problems. And then we would, of course, come to a certain deal of how can they then, of course, um, how can we make money off of what we are providing them? Because I mean, it's not a non-profit organization; it's a social enterprise, right? It, it's designed to actually sustain itself through making profits while solving a social problem, right? Creating social impact. So we would do this until the end of the until the end of the year, until the end of the enactors calendar year. And then what happens is that then we gather all of our information, organize it into a nice report. And of course, we all participating universities across the world would go to what's called a national final, right? So in South Africa, we all went to our national final in Sandton, where we would then meet up with all other participating universities, right? University of KwaZulu Natal, University of Pretoria, all of them really, University of Cape Town, all of them were there. And of course, we then get to pitch or give a presentation of the work we did, of course, the budget that we had, how much, like how much impact we made, the profits we made, basically just giving out your report like a normal company would, right? And all of this, by the way, It's just all of this happens while we are still studying, right? And of course, at the end of the entire national competition, whichever team wins then goes to participate internationally at Silicon Valley. Now, this is where now it's actually the World Cup now. So whichever team or university wins in the country represents the entire country. So when I was there last year, it was Durban University of Technology that won. So they went to Silicon Valley to then go and represent the entire country. But basically, what you learn from that is the importance of how to create social impact, right? Sustainable social impact, which I believe honestly is what's needed, not in just our country, but in our continent. Like I've mentioned before in previous episodes of this podcast, that I truly don't think that entrepreneurship is the way to go. Maybe it should be to a certain extent, but it shouldn't be the country's priority because there's more social problems that need to be solved than just luxurious problems. Because mostly entrepreneurship can just solve luxury problems, right? I understand that there are essential problems that entrepreneurship solves, but in this case, there's more social problems that really need to be solved, right? So for me, that is why I keep on stressing that the need for social entrepreneurship education is extremely important and is extremely high. There's a huge need for it for a country and a continent that's behind socioeconomically. Definitely, that's what's needed, right? And in fact, and I understand that on- in previous years, the model that worked at first, or that was being used rather, was the model of non-profit organizations, right? But it's been mentioned many times that non-profit organizations aren't actually so effective because they actually rely on payouts or donations. And of course, social enterprises, they rely actually on themselves because it's more sustainable. It's an enterprise with a social impact. So it does make money, but at least that business, the entire function of that business creates more social impact. So it minimizes social problems or even eliminates if it can, right? So for me, definitely, from my experience of this, what I've learned and what I've been building myself as a social entrepreneur, I can definitely see why this is what's more needed than actually just normal entrepreneurship. Maybe if South Africa was a developed third world country, I mean first world country, right? Then it could have made sense that okay, you know what? Let's maybe the government should promote entrepreneurship. But for now, definitely social entrepreneurship is what I believe is needed. I think a good example of a social enterprise that I would like to give is that of um, Tato Khatlanye. Tato Khatlanye is I discovered her. Well, I mean, like I first read about her rather. I think it was in 2012 or 2013. I really don't remember exactly. Or 2014. I really don't remember. But basically, she started a company that, well, it's a recycling company, number one. So they collect plastic bags and then they then turn them into normal school bags, right? They recycle them and create school bags. And then she takes a, it's like a peanut butter can, right? A glass jar, a peanut butter glass jar. And then on the top of the lid, she puts a solar panel, and then underneath the lid is a small little light bulb. And what happens is that that lid is normally taken off and then put on the recycle plastic bag, school bag, right? Because they make school bags out of the plastic. They take that lid and then they put it at the back, and then they actually give it to children or they sell it to kids from disadvantaged areas. And usually you find that these kids actually walk to school. So as they are walking to school, the the light bulb is actually charging using solar energy. It charges and charges up and charges up and charges up. They'll go to school, of course, also come back while charging up, even when they leave their bags, in the sun while they're playing during break time. And by the time they come back home, and you find that some of these kids at their homes, they don't have access to electricity, they then take that light bulb, screw it back into the peanut butter glass jar, and then they switch it on. It becomes a lamp for them to study at night. Beautiful idea. It solves so many social problems, but it's still sustainable because it's a product that's sold, right? Number one, it's plastic. It solves pollution, and I understand we shouldn't be polluting in the first place. But of course, we do understand that sometimes human behavior can be, you know, So it solve that problem, and it's also resourceful because they're using recyclable material, right? And of course, it's also solving the problem of electricity. So for me, these are the kind of ideas that we should be bringing about through social entrepreneurship education. And in my opinion, if the more that can be pushed, the quicker then we will accelerate the socioeconomic state of the, not even just the country South Africa, but the continent as a whole, Africa, right? And then soon enough, we will have, of course, a continent that competes equally with other uh, continents, and everyone will live in prosperity. I understand it's not that easy, right? Any kind of economy, for it to be where it is, especially in developed countries, it took them a very long time. But my point is, there are much simpler ways to do things that can actually bring maximum effect. And honestly, for the state that Africa is in, definitely social entrepreneurship is what's needed. So yes.